Good morning, my friends. It's nice to see you on this Tuesday. Today we are beginning our exploration of the internal experience that we go through when we're going through the seduction, abuse, and discard cycle with someone. Now, this internal experience doesn't just apply to the S.A.D cycle. It also applies to relationships that are emotionally unavailable, because this is an internal experience that's reflective of our relationship with attachment, emotional bonding, and largely is shaped by our experience with our parents and our first core peer relationships, especially around love and friendship. So if you're new to me, I am Marshall Bircher. Welcome. I help codependents rediscover their well-being and happiness after codependency by helping them heal the trauma bond, helping them reclaim who they are, and helping them create and enjoy sustainable, happy relationships. So my goal is to help you escape codependency by restoring your safety, your sanity, and yourself so that you can thrive in knowing who you are and then living who you are so you can have happy, healthy relationships in your world. So there you go. I need to share this out to the community really quick, so I'm going to do that here. So if you're looking for a safe haven, a shelter, a place where you can find understanding, guidance, and tools in your journey beyond codependency, join the Thriving Beyond Codependency community. The link's above on Facebook, below on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also Google it, Thriving Beyond Codependency community, or you can Facebook search it. And let's get this share out. Hi, Renee. Good to see you this morning. Where's the share button? Yes. And more buttons to click. Clicky, click, click. Okay. It's nice to see you. Seduction, abuse, discard. So that stands for, that's the S.A.D cycle. We're seduced by an individual. We're put into a state of euphoria in that. And then when the abuse begins, and we move into a distress phase. And then when they discard us, we move into what's called a despair phase. This emotional cycle of euphoria, distress, despair, I call the EDD cycle. And this is the internal experience we have as codependents when we're dealing with someone that we have an attachment to. And we feel very vulnerable to. We feel very, initially we feel very seen and very valued by them. They really, one client described it as reaches into my soul and can see me like no one else ever has. That's an extremely powerful experience, and it creates an emotional bond with this person. It also creates a chemical association in the brain with this person. Specifically, the brain associates that person with oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. That's the bonding agents that we would call love. This is the same thing a baby, an infant experiences with their parent when they see their parent and their parent is paying attention to them and being present with them. This is what bonds the mother and the father and the child together. This is what people experience in limerence. This is what people experience when they have crushes on someone and when they fall in love with them. So it's a very common thing, but in this instance, because of a number of factors, this limerence turns into a euphoria, into this mind and reality altering experience that disconnects us from reality. It feeds us into a fantasy, and it traps us in the seduction, abuse, discard loop. So today, our primary focus is the euphoric phase, because this is one of the most important things for us to really grasp. If we're going to break free of codependency, if we're going to heal the trauma bond, we have to deal with euphoria. And this is the most confronting aspect of the work, because it's something that we have to continually encounter over and over and over, and learn to reshape our experience to it so that we can discover healthy, safe, balanced love. That's one of our first challenges with euphoria, is that we confuse it with love, and they are not the same thing. So let's talk about where euphoria comes from. Euphoria is the result, the product of neglect, emotional neglect. Hey, Crystal. Good morning to you. So think of it like a desert. So we're wandering out in the world. We haven't been seen. We haven't been valued. We haven't been witnessed. We haven't been appreciated. There's this thing I teach called the 10 core needs. These 10 core needs of being accepted and valued and protected and appreciated and celebrated and played with and be given time and availability and nurture. Those haven't been met. They've gone dry. We've been starving for them. We have been in a deep thirst for it. And a lot of times we don't even know this. We don't know this because this is our normal. This desert where nothing lives and nothing grows, nothing survives. This is my normal. What are you talking about? It's always been this way. And then comes along a rainstorm or a person. And this person starts to engulf us, to shower us with all this attention, with all this acknowledgement, with all this deep seeing into us. Starts to effuse, or I guess that's the word, I don't know. They start to douse us with grandiose claims of knowing who we are and how we are the one for them. We're the special one. They have been looking for us all their lives. It is a Jerry Maguire, you complete me moment. And there's this huge amount of water coming out of the sky onto this desert of needs. And we're flooded. Things come alive that we've dreamt of. We've ached for. We have cried night after night for. We have lived with the emptiness of it for so long. And here is the rain finally. And it's not just a little trickle. It's a full-on, deluge coming down. And this takes the brain from this chemical desert and launches it into this oasis, this ocean of dopamine, serotonin, and come on, Marshall, you just had it. Those three chemicals: dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. and we're just drowning in it now. So all the colors in the world look bright. Everything tastes so much better. You feel this emptiness within you filling up. This loneliness starts to ebb. The ache is gone. We're in La La Land. Because this person is this deluge, this seduction, and this euphoria. We start to lose ourselves. We start to lose contact with our body. We start to ignore our boundaries. We start to lean in more to it. And we're like, please give me more. And they're like, okay, can I move in? I mean, I've only known you for a week, but can I move in? And you're like, yes. Oh my God, yes, please move in. But part of you's like, wait a minute. Something's going on here. There's something off with this person. That little voice that you're like, go away. I like this. Give me more. This euphoria is directly related to the neglect, the emotional needs-based neglect we've lived with. That physical neglect, the relational neglect. It's why it's so intense. It's why we think it's love. Because we've learned in our past experience that love is intermittent. It shows up, and then there's this, abuse and this discard from the parents, or they just withdraw because they're not emotionally available. They're just like, nope, can't do this, too much. And now we're still experiencing the distress and the discard. and the despair that comes with it. Because what do? I need you, Mom. I need you, Dad. Sometimes we're put into this state because the parent died. That's one of the major factors in my own journey. My mother was my parent. She was my protector. And when she passed away when I was a child, I lost access to that. And then I live without that. And so there's an ache there. And so that, for me, would get activated into this euphoric state. Finally, someone might be kind of like my parent. Somebody could take care of me. Somebody would have my back. Somebody would shelter me. Somebody would love me. It's euphoric. It's intense. It's overwhelming. Good morning, Jolene. Crystal says, I would tell my husband and beg for him for a decade and a half that my love languages were to please love me, and he would refuse. And just last week he accused me of doing anything to get love I needed, and that I was on a heroin. Yeah. They like to turn it on us, right? But here's the thing. The euphoria motivates us to tolerate things that are unhealthy for us, because now we're ignoring our boundaries. We're ignoring our value. We're putting ourselves aside. And we're becoming what I call undue tolerant. We're giving undue tolerance to abuse, to neglect, to these kinds of attacks on ourselves. We are not able to keep ourselves because we give ourselves up in exchange for the little breadcrumb they give us. Now, this is a lot like a feast, okay? So, here's the irony of this. All this love, all this euphoria, and I'm going to put love in quotes there, it's something that's built into us. It's being activated by the actions of the other individual because the needs are getting met. When our needs are sustainably met, both internally with ourselves and externally with others, so we have this symbiosis going on, we don't have the euphoria. We can go into a little bit of limerence and a little bit of, bliss thinking when we meet someone new and it's the onset of a new relationship. But we have a grounded sense in reality. We're keeping our body, we're keeping our boundaries, we're keeping our identity. We're not giving ourselves up. We're not tolerating things that are harmful to us. That's healthy. That's a normal, healthy limerence stage, because we go into a neurological fantasy, according to a man I follow named Mark Waldman. Because the brain, the brain, its experience of another person in a euphoric state is a fantasy. And when we have to be very conscious of this, because the euphoria deceives us. What it does for the codependent is it creates a reference point about this person in the brain that says this person is this way. And then it identifies It identifies this person as the seducer, the one that was giving you all the attention, all the love, all these gifts, seeing deeply into you, finally bringing you into their world. That's the fantasy. Oh, it's part of it. The other part of the fantasy is that they complete you. That their love is what brings you worthiness. That their love makes you lovable. This is the problem with euphoria, is that we become enmeshed and engulfed in them. And that's what they want. They want to engulf us so that they can take what they want, the supply, the cookie, the benefit. And we give ourselves to it. That's the difference between a romantic love and euphoria. Romantic love doesn't lose itself. It's grounded in reality. It's sober. It's conscious that the other person's a limited human being. They have a strong sense of their own anchor in self. They're not looking for someone to complete them. Healthy romantic love is I want someone to share life with, to have adventure with, to have play with, to have intimacy and companionship and support with. Euphoria is a completely different planet, completely different objective. And so in this euphoric state, the brain creates this reference point of this person saying, this is who they are. So when the abuse side of things starts, this is where the distress comes in, because now we're experiencing something with this individual that's completely opposite to what they were over here in the seduction phase. In fact, a lot of times what they did in the seduction phase is what they criticize you for in the abuse phase, especially things that they're like, I just adore this about you. Well, in the abuse phase, you're like, my God, how can anybody be like that? Yeah, it's a sometimes very black and white experience there. Now, sometimes it's gradient. You get some more gray in there where they're more and more critical and not necessarily so black and white. And that can be very confusing because they waffle on it. So this is not someone who's like a true narcissist. This is more someone that's emotionally unavailable and probably has narcissistic tendencies because they are feeling entitled to hurt and harm you in order to get you to be something they will want you to be or not want you to be. So euphoria and the distress phase have a direct relationship to how our brain has created a reference point or an image of that person. This is why we go into, it's partly why we go into distress. We'll talk about that more in the next training. But this is important to the fantasy because in the seduction, abuse, discard cycle, internally we're doing this euphoria, distress, despair thing. It's all anchored around the fantasy that I can get them back to that euphoric state, back to the seductive state, because that's who they truly are. This is why we stay in abusive relationships, because we think this first phase of the relationship is the true phase, the truth of that person. It is not the truth of it. Healthy people do not have a split. They are unified. They have an integrity to themselves and within their behaviors, privately and publicly, over a duration of time. Unhealthy people don't, because they have to have a mask up. They got to have what's called the glowy thing. The big ugly fish, it's the glowy thing. Let me see what I've been playing with this app view thing, so I think I might be able to try this out. Nope, it's not working. All right. I want to show you a picture of the fish with the glowy thing. I'll figure it out. Put it on there. But the glowy thing is what we buy into as reality because of the euphoria. This is so important because the glowy thing is the bait. It's what draws you in so that they can go chomp. This is why we have to start distrusting euphoria. We have to do a very painful process of sobering ourselves up so that we can be in real contact with what is real. This is why sanity making is the second focus point of the heal yourself strategy. Because first we got to restore your safety. Restore your physical, emotional, and relational safety so that you can consider reality. So we can restore sanity. We restore sanity by learning how to make contact back with reality, and that requires us to counter the euphoria. We have to push it. We have to question it. We have to realize what's really going on. Because what's really going on in the background with euphoria is our needs have been met in some way. We've been triggered into this enormous amount of chemical dependency on this person. This has to deal with what's called attachment injury or attachment trauma. Because those needs, the neglect with it, injures the attachment. Attachment is the emotional bond or dependency we feel. Well, attachment's the dependency we feel on a person. Like, I need them. Bond is the connection I feel with them, and attachment matures into bond through safe relationship patterns of behavior. Namely, they are built on the 8 relationship bare minimums. Here's the trick here with euphoria, and this is where a lot of times people don't discuss this aspect of euphoria, and it's really important because with attachment comes vulnerability. And with vulnerability comes fear. Now, in any relationship, you're going to have an attachment bond with the other person. So this is where we feel a little vulnerable. And this is where we feel maybe a little exposed at times, and we need to take steps to regulate it, to make sure we're safe, to make sure they are safe, to build trust, to build security in the experience. This is a normal process. It's what we do, especially if we've had past attachment trauma, because we're coming from either an anxious or an avoidant or disorganized attachment experience in that. Now, if you grew up in a healthy family, you likely have what's called secure attachment, which means you're not highly pulled in that. You can keep yourself, you're willing to deal with conflict, you've got capacity to deal with uncertainty and with proximity and emotional intimacy, things like that. Well, we'll be getting into attachment here in a few trainings down the road here. But here's the trick. When we're in euphoria, we begin to feel this big dependency on the other person. They become the source of our euphoria, but they also become the source of our sense of wholeness, our sense of identity, our sense of worth, our sense of lovability. And this dependency brings up fear. And for me personally, it scared the living heck out of me. I was terrified of it because they could leave. They could harm me with it. They could abandon me. They could die. They could not care. And that was extremely terrifying. That put me into big distress phases. And sometimes they would do, well, depending on who it was, because I've had this with non-narcissistic people and I've had this with narcissistic people. The narcissistic people, their abuse would definitely put me into distress fast. I would become dissociated from my body. I would lose contact with time and reality. I would not know what is real. And so I would fawn to them and do whatever they needed me to do so that they would stop the abuse. Now, in the non-narcissistic relationships, I would interpret behaviors other people were doing through my trauma lens, and that would also activate it. It's one of the most complex parts of our journey is learning how to discern between someone who is abusing you and somebody who has a normal pattern of behavior, but we're reacting to it in a way that echoes the past. That deals with trauma work, that deals with emotional regulation, and getting back to reality. Basically sane making. And that's the key here to euphoria. Breaking free of euphoria is a practice of regulating attachment distress, fulfilling needs in a healthy way, and reconnecting back with reality and with self. We have to reconnect back to the inner child who's the one experiencing the euphoria and the terror that comes with it, and help them heal. And that healing really is about an integration, bringing them back home from their exile in the desert. And that takes practice, and we work with that deeply in the Heal Yourself strategy. It's one of the core components to this practice and this work, so that you can be free of this euphoria and the trauma bond. Now, the rub with euphoria is it feels really good. It's great, and we want it. We have to learn to live beyond it. Because real healthy love brings in so much more than euphoria. Euphoria is intense, but it's not safe because it's got that fear there. The fear caused by their abuse, the fear that we feel in response to our sense of dependency on them. Euphoria has no freedom to be the self. Real love does. Real love has a consistency and a reliability, a dependability in it. Euphoria doesn't. Euphoria peaks and crashes. It goes through this intermittent reinforcement cycle, which we'll talk about in a few trainings here. It drives us mad. And euphoria, it has cracks in it. We know instinctively something where we're not seeing reality, but we deny it. We ignore it. Because again, the fantasy runs on beliefs that are false illusions about reality, denials that protect those beliefs and illusions, and functions on the idea that the primacy of truth is determined by the emotion, especially the intensity of that emotion. This is why we get stuck in fantasy. We think the euphoria equals truth. And we have to start to look at reality and work with our needs and work with our attachment and work with our inner self so that we can find and feel real love again. Because when we have real love, we don't need or ache for the euphoria. Our desert is now a blooming oasis that is sustainable. It's not flooded. We're not drowning in it anymore. We're learning what it's like to have safe bond, to be seen and valued and loved for who we are, not what we do. We don't have to chase the love. The love is available to us. Our job is just to become more and more available to love while keeping ourselves. So this is why I focus heavily on the importance of cracking the fantasy and moving away from euphoria, because it is our gateway back into who we are and back into real, healthy, sustainable love that doesn't require us. It doesn't require us to give ourselves up, our needs, our wants, our feelings, our identity, our sanity. And that's what I help you accomplish in the Heal Yourself strategy. And Heal Yourself strategy is currently open for the live sessions. Live sessions start February 22nd. This is the only time this year that live sessions will be taught. The enrollment is open year-round, so you can get into the recorded sessions. You can also participate in whatever live sessions are going on at that point. But if you want to start from the beginning is this, just a week and a half away, roughly. So I will be guiding you in breaking free of the euphoria, restoring your sense of sanity, your sense of safety, and your sense of self by helping you heal the attachment, regulate the attachment distress, heal attachment injury, come back to who you are, restore your sense of power in your world, and help you detect reality and acclimate to it. It is a journey, my friends, because I've been through it. I teach it because I've done it. It's not... a lot of times people read a book and they go out and teach, or they went and did a 5-day class or something. This is something I lived with for 30 years and had to do a lot of work to move through it. And I found what it takes. So I invite you to join us. The link for registration and enrollment's above on Facebook, below on YouTube. Go gently with yourself in dealing with euphoria. It's going to be one of the hardest things you deal with, because in euphoria there is grief. It's the grief of the fantasy, the grief we didn't get what we needed growing up, the things that we live without. As we allow that grief to occupy space and to be respected, the euphoria tempers itself, and we start to discover a kind sobriety and a more sense of wholeness with ourselves. Because really, that desert that we've been walking through for so long, it's grief. It's the neglect. And behind that neglect is grief. Grief for the things that we needed and didn't get, the things we've lost, the things we've hoped for that we've never had. So the euphoria isn't a signal that there's something wrong with you. It's a signal of what you've been through. It tells the tale of your neglect. I'll check out the comments here. Generally, my mom was not emotionally available and I moved out when I was 14. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would be incredible emotional pain. Aaron shares, I just went through this with someone and I thought was my best friend. Thank you for helping me recognize it. You're welcome. Honor that grief. Honor that loss. That's real. That matters, Aaron. That's a really important place. Renee, I love Euphoria, but it makes me crazy. Of course it does. And of course we love it because our brains are addicted to dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. But in Euphoria, we also get it mixed in there with adrenaline and cortisol. And I call it fear love for that reason. Because that's what it is. Real love doesn't have the fear. Real love, in some ways, feels real boring compared to Euphoria. But it's so safe, and it's so kind, and it's so nourishing. so gentle with us. Thank you, Cindy. I did something to my mouse here. Oh, there we go. Yeah, the roller coaster ride, and boom, that right there. Euphoria is not the truth. It ain't. Yeah, it isn't the truth. It is a fantasy, guys, that we create. I want to talk about fantasy a bit. The fantasy is how we survived the abuse, the discard, and the seduction. Especially if we were children. It's the only it was the only available avenue we had to endure what was going on until we could get out of it. The function of the fantasy is to help you survive until you can escape. The function of euphoria is to alert you to your unmet needs and to the neglect you've been enduring. See, I don't look at codependency from the angle of disease or identity or some flaw in us. The codependency is the result of neglect. It's the result of abuse. It is how we survived. It's the survival strategy our brain came up with in order to get out of there when we could. So there's no condemnation and there's no judgment about it. Some people, there's some prominent people who talk about codependency as something very awful and that they're terrible people, and that's not the truth. We're not terrible people. We lived through terror, and codependency is what got us through it. Now, our responsibility is, once we become aware of it, is to heal. And we don't heal codependency because that's the byproduct of what we went through. We heal the trauma, the injury, the neglect to our identity, to our emotions, to our attachment, to our safety, and to our sanity so that we can return home to ourselves. And that's what this work is about, and that's what I'm about. Because I'll tell you, I thought I never would be free of codependency. I was told by counselor after counselor, oh, this is something you got to learn to live with, Marshall. Go to a CODA meeting, do the 12 steps, learn to live with it, because this is part of who you are. No, it isn't. I'm a stubborn Aries, and I'm like, I don't agree with this. And so I went out and I found out for myself. Now, there are a few times on that road I was like, maybe that's true. But I discovered that it isn't. And it first started with the accountability component. Like, I'm willing to own my codependency, my euphoria, my fantasy. Now I'm going to start questioning these things and see what reality is. I'm going to live in the question and discover what's going on. So again, fantasy kept you alive. Codependency kept you alive so you could escape. Euphoria is just a signal of unmet needs and what you really need in your world. And it's not that other person. We don't need other people to complete us. What we need is bond and security with ourselves and others. We need connection with people, not absorption, not enmeshment. Connection. Because you're a sovereign being, a sovereign human being. They're sovereign. And when we can respect that sovereignty, we can access connection so that we can be freely seen and valued and loved for who we are. That's the goal. And that's what we can accomplish. That's my goal for you in all the work that I do, whether it's in the Heal Yourself strategy, the Know Yourself strategy, the relationship strategy. It's all about bringing us to that point where we can know, love, and live who we are and be loved, valued, and seen for who we are with others. We can experience that true loving connection that we deserve. The only reason I know that's possible is because I've experienced it and I live it. So I'm just down the road just a few miles more than you. I'm just showing you what worked for me, I think will work for you. So if this resonates with you, I invite you to join the Heal Yourself strategy, and let's do this together. Because the live sessions again start February 22nd. We're going to be working throughout the year. Notice I haven't said that, hey, in 8 weeks we're going to blah, blah, blah. No. The Heal Yourself strategy takes place over 2021. Right now we're at 24 modules, so it'll be out 24 classes or weeks. There's going to be more added to it because I am slightly obsessed at making this as effective as possible for you. So yeah, so we work together for a long time because that's what it takes. Anybody saying that you can heal your codependency in 12 weeks, or you can get over your love addiction in 9 weeks, blah blah blah. No, you can't do that, because it's not. It doesn't function that way. Healing is a journey. It's a discovery. So what I do is I give you practices and skills and knowledge that help you make that journey. And then we give you what I call I've got your back support through the community, through live mentoring that happens twice a week. Live mentoring is where you can log into a Zoom room with me and other students, and we can support you with whatever you're showing up with. Happens on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's part of what you get when you enroll. You get lifetime access to the tools and materials so that you can reference them going down the road. So we've got your back in this. You're not doing this alone. Regardless of when you enroll, you're not doing it alone, because that's always available to you. So yeah, this is a journey into who you are, so that you can discover for yourself that you really truly are innately lovable and worthy and beautiful and brilliant. You truly are worth knowing, loving, and keeping. So there you go, guys. I appreciate you. Be safe with yourself out there. If you're dealing with euphoria, if this is really like, oh my word, that's me, be kind with yourself. Take time. Go on a walk. Go touch a tree. Go sit in the grass, whether it's frozen and crackly like it is here, or if there is grass, touch a rock. The reason I'm advising this is because it gets you back in your body. It helps you sober a little bit. It gives your nervous system a chance to relax, because euphoria is a stress state. Puts us into a freeze-fawn loop. Around and around we go. So be gentle with yourself, and then jump in and roll, so that we can help you come back to sobriety and reconnect with what's real for you, so that your happiness becomes available to you again. Your wholeness becomes available, because you're already whole. It's just your brain doesn't have access to that yet. I'm going to teach you how to get there. Okay. I will see you guys in our next discussion, our next training video. We'll be discussing the distress phase of the EDD cycle. And then after that, we'll discuss the despair phase. Okay. Be safe out there, and I will see you online and in our next training video.